or people in general, they have all these things because almost everyone has narcissistic traits. Narcissistic traits doesn't mean you are diagnosed narcissistic personality disorder. There's a different thing. But trauma leads to narcissistic traits, or sometimes narcissistic type of behavior in situations, especially personal relationships, for example, or when you relate to others. So what happens is, at that moment, you kind of like, you want to be an adult, but then you plunge into this sort of a mode where you're like helpless, not in control, feeling like everybody judges you, like exactly like a child would be. So you forget that you're actually an adult at that moment. And so the most important thing is to come back to that awareness that I am actually an adult. I am in my adult body. I can stand for myself. I have to overcome and express my concerns or stand my ground, right? So if you start overpowering this feeling of, you know, stupor, kind of like a stagnation inside where you're like blocked either in the throat or blocked in the solar plexus, and you're like, you don't know what to say, how to act. At that moment, you're just like, no, I'm going to act from my inner. I'm going to overcome. So you make this effort to overcome. It's like this, be afraid, but do it anyways. I'm not saying to pursue risky business, but because sometimes this fear or the feeling of a little bit like caution allows you to be careful in certain situations because it's an intuitive feeling. It's our natural barrier to protect ourselves. But when you know that this comes from trauma and the situation is absolutely safe, but you still feel that way, then you have to make an effort to just consciously dissolve by just doing otherwise. If that energy paralyzes you, you just inhale, exhale, relax, and ask yourself, what could be worse? What is the worst case scenario? Okay, like I'm ashamed, but then I'll just say it anyways. And so you say it. Because I've observed people who have trauma, they are constantly in a cycle. So they are kind of like covered meaning like they're covered, concealed. They are building this energy of anger. For example, they're not saying to a partner, listen, I didn't like how you treated me today. You just keep on building it. Next time they treat you, but instead of telling them right at the start, you keep on, no, he has to know, he has to this, because you are in a cycle of evaluation, devaluation, evaluation, devaluation. So at first you're like, okay, let me test them. Again, testing is another, because the person doesn't feel safe with themselves. That's why they start testing everyone else. And they test them in such a way where they already have that desire to kind of potentially see them fail, to prove themselves that everyone is bad, to again evoke that trauma. So this cycle of evaluation, devaluation is perpetual until you break it, until you realize it. You don't need to wait. The moment you don't like something, the moment you see a red flag in that person, you just say, I'm sorry, why did you act like this? Or you ask a person what stood behind the action right at the start, before you accumulate like a sack of all their mischief and misbehavior, and then you collected that, you know, resentment and anger, and then you just unleash that on them, and then you kind of sabotage and break the relationship because you now have all the supposedly evidence to devaluate them. You see, and then you wonder, after that, you unleashed that resentment, and you again back to that victimhood, self-pity, my relationship don't work, relationships don't work, nobody loves me. So to prove yourself once again that everyone is against you, like you against the world. That's typical narcissistic cycle. And it doesn't, you don't need to be a diagnosed narcissist, but you have these traits like everyone else does. A lot of people are in these cycles, even though they can be empathic or, you know, compassionate to others, they still have these. I don't see difference, by the way, between empathy and selfishness, because a lot of people can be empathic, but in a kind of twisted way where it doesn't really come from their selfless being. It comes from the fear of facing the same consequence or trauma when they're witnessing someone suffering, let's say. So it's a kind of a, I would say, insincere compassion, but many people are so much kind of grown into their masks that they cannot tell the difference between their authentic being and non-authentic being. And authentic being is not even fully discovered and acknowledged. That happens when you awaken. When you awaken, you start acknowledging that, yeah, this is clearly my awakened being, my authentic being. I'm absolutely relaxed. I'm absolutely comfortable. I can express myself freely. That's an authentic being. When you do not express yourself because of someone else's action or reaction, you do not, your actions come from authenticity, from authentic being, regardless of what other people may think or might judge you, or how they will judge you, or these thoughts just don't arise. That's a healed space of consciousness. But as long as these afterthoughts, these kind of calculation, manipulation exists in the mind, it tells us of an unrefined, unhealed state of consciousness. And even if you are awakened to the authenticity or your authentic being, you are not established yet there, because you clearly see these unrefined tendencies, and you have to dissolve them by becoming more and more aware, by seeing how these tendencies sabotage your life, sabotage your relationships, push you into this perpetual cycle of evaluation, devaluation, proving yourself once again that the world is against you, nobody loves you, and so on and so forth. So as long as you are not fully aware of the cycle and how it originates from within you, you cannot heal. The moment you become aware, this is the healing, because it doesn't mean that you will change overnight, but you will become more and more and more aware with time. While in contact, communicating with other people, you will notice these waves that arise. Oh, again, the wave of judgment, because before you devaluate these people, before you unleash your anger, you basically are in the process of testing, aka judging these people for what they do or don't do to you. But you, to start with, haven't listed the list of your expectations, or haven't given them that list of expectations. And so for any relationships to be successful, you have to be very straightforward and open with your supposedly demands or wishes, if you will, right? Like what you actually would like to have in your life. And what you would like to have in your life is harmony, but then you have all these expectations and conditionings which you are kind of afraid to tell them, but yet they're so important for you. So in this case, you have to come to terms that, yes, you do have these expectations. But then if you list them out or you tell them about that, you have to bear the consequences and to have enough courage to maybe even walk away from a relationship if people right away get turned off by these expectations when you express them, or they have negative reaction, but at least you do it right away before you get involved, before you start again this cycle of evaluation, devaluation. And so if you do so, you spare yourself a lot of time where you kind of sort out your space, or you clear up your space of these unnecessary attachments and relationships that already from the start have no potential, because your expectations, their expectations do not match. So why to hide and prolong the pain or get involved and attached unnecessarily, right?